Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva bandhuscha sakha Tvameva Tvameva vedya dravitam Tvameva Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva Tvameva sarvam mama deva deva. Jai Guru. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Matarupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. So we're in the section which is the summation of the teaching put in the mouth of Sri Tripuri, where all the sages have gone to ask her what's the best of everything. So will you help us out, please, Puneet?
Iyam syat parichinna swat amidhya shivatmika swatmam vidhyan sadhaneshu ta sarvasu pratishtitaha. This knowledge of one's own self, which is of the nature of Shiva, the supreme reality, would be unlimited or undivided. All those other accomplishments are well established in the means or spiritual efforts for the knowledge of one's own self. Note, the other accomplishments may occur spontaneously during the spiritual practices for the realization of the self.
So these siddhis that occur, they frankly are the result of austerities done in prior lives. Listen very carefully. The accomplishment of siddhis is like lifting weights or learning languages. It's a worldly accomplishment. For some yogis, along the way, as they have as their goal, moksha, liberation, as the result of past actions, they will, as the note says, spontaneously occur. Now, let me nuance this a little bit. A lot of people say, oh, Jim, are you reading our minds? No. But I know my own mind. And minds aren't very different. So you will find when you know your own mind, your own motivations, you will be able to relate to, understand the heart of anyone. Because we're all in this together. The other thing you will find, unless you're on top of a mountain somewhere or in a cave, the emptier you become, the more you feel the thoughts and feelings of others as if they were your own. What do we do about it? Same thing we do with stuff that's come out of our own karmic stream. I have no thoughts and feelings of my own. Now, depends on your motivation. My particular view of things is the awareness of suffering is an invitation to prayer. You can always send blessings. Even to the point when I hear a siren go by, I go, oh, blessing. Now, there's a wonderful interview done with the Dalai Lama. He did a practice called, or does a practice called Tonglen, where you inhale the suffering of your particular student, a client, a patient, a colleague, and exhale serenity, peace, the antidote. If you want to learn more about it, Pema Chodron has a wonderful online essay on it. So this person asks His Holiness, do you do Tonglen? And he said, yes, I do. And the person said, does it help anybody? And His Holiness says, I really don't know, but I feel better when I do it. That's a little nuance. All right, next verse.
Atma-vidya vidhavesta vantaraya prayojakaha kim tabhi indrijalatma siddhitulyabhi rihitam. But these are ones causing obstacles in the practice or means followed for self-knowledge. What is desired through those accomplishments which are similar to the accomplishments of the nature of magical tricks.
Yes. So if you are attached to acquiring siddhis, they are an impediment. They are an impediment. They're just another worldly desire. And usually something's going on in my mind. Oh, if I could read auras or do astral projection, that just makes me a little bit superior to other people. It's worldly pleasure. So don't get caught up in that. If they spontaneously occur, fine. Don't be attached. Any thoughts on this? There's a very famous story about the Spanish Saint Teresa of Avila. And one of her students was deep in ecstasy and had levitated off the floor. And St. Teresa came in, and you know what she said to her? Well, here's a broom. While you're up there, you might as well get rid of the cobwebs. Good attitude towards cities. Next one.
Yasya sakshat brahmapadam api syat trina sammitam kinyatyeta siddhayo vai kala shapana hetava. For whom even the abode of Brahma, the creator, would actually be equal to a blade of grass, of what consideration would be these accomplishments which are the means for passing time?
Yes. So even being powerful like Brahma, the creator, is dross. There's only one siddhi worth acquiring. Atma Vidya. Parama Shanti. Knowledge of myself. True peace of mind. The cessation of all struggles. Everything else is dross. Next one.
Tasmat siddhi netarasyat atmavijnana siddhitah yaya yanta shokanasho bhavedananda sandrata. Therefore, there cannot be another accomplishment greater than the accomplishment of the knowledge of the self, by which there would be complete destruction of sorrow and abundance of bliss.
Yes. Nothing to say about that. That's the summation of the teaching. And you know, I've had students come and say, oh, Jim, I think my third eye is opening. I'm feeling buzzings in my third eye. Okay, notice it. Don't try to stop it. But it's not particularly important. I have buzzings in my crown chakra. Is my kundalini rising? Maybe. Don't get involved with all of it. Oh, I have all this energy buzzing through my body. I can't sleep at night. Okay. Get up and read Gita. No big deal. Next one.
Saiva siddha netaratu mrityugasa vimochini iyam atma jnana siddhi virvidha bhyasame bhedatah buddhe nair malya bhedacha paripaka vibhedatah sankshepastu trividhat chot sankshepastastu trividha chottama madhyamadhama. That alone is the accomplishment liberating one from the seizure by death, not another. This accomplishment of the knowledge of the self is of three kinds briefly: the highest, the middling, and the lowest, on account of the difference in various practices leading to self-knowledge, the difference in the purity of the intellect of the aspirants, and the difference in the maturity of the accomplishment.
Yes. So the great accomplishment is Brahma Vidya. That's the Jnana Siddhi, the accomplishment of knowledge. All else fails. And now the goddess is going to enumerate these three experiences, which have to do with the experiences of the realized person, according to the force of their past, subtlety of their intellects, how much tapas they needed to do before knowledge became steady. Low, middling, highest. Let's see what she says.
Loke dvijana amrishya patita shruti sammita medhaya cha mahabhyasat vyaparashad sankula apyaskhali tavarnaya patita shruti rutama. Sages, this is similar to the Vedas studied by Brahmanas in the world. Due to retentive faculty and intense practice, though crowded with 100 acts, the Vedic text, which is recited with its syllables undeviating from the text, is the highest.
So she's drawing a parallel to those Brahmanas who are chanting scripture. If you're totally focused on the scripture and you can chant long passages from memory and you don't make any mistakes, that's the highest. Going on.
Samahitasya vyapare samahitasya chanyada purvavadhya pyas khalita patita madhyama shrutihi. The Vedic text recited as before without deviation or slipping from the text during actions by one who is concentrated or at other times by one who is not concentrated is the middling. Note, though engaged in actions, he recites correctly by concentration on the recitation. If he is not engaged in actions, he can recite correctly even without concentration.
Yes. So if we're chanting Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, you know it very well, but in the middle verse, does your mind wander? But you keep on chanting? That's the middling. So those who can chant the scriptures, but their minds wander, but they can keep on chanting, even because of it. Going on.
Ya sada hyanyusandhana yogadeva bhavet tatha patita shrutiratyanta khalita twadhamahisa. So also that Vedic text recited which would be completely undeviating only through careful attention always is the lowest.
So sometimes those people have to chant and they've got to put all their attention on it, and their memory may slip. They may need a cheat sheet just to make sure they can continue to chant. They can still do it, but they don't have the memory, the attention, the concentration. So she's using this as a metaphor. The highest, the middling, and the lowest. Let's see how she uses this. Going on.
Evam Evatma vijnana siddhirukta tridharshayah yamahavya vahareshu pratisandhana varjane anyada tadvarjane va sarvada pratisandhitah anyunyadhika bhavasyat sottama madhyamadhama atrottamaiva sansiddhe parakashtha nirupita. Sages, the accomplishment of the knowledge of the self is described in this matter alone in three ways. That accomplishment, having a nature which is neither less nor more during intense actions, even on giving up recollection or careful attention, and at other times when not engaged in actions, even on giving up that recollection or careful attention, and at all times only through recollection or careful attention would be respectively the highest, the middling, and the lowest. Here, the highest alone is ascertained as the utmost limit of accomplishment.
So, if you get it and you really understand it's yourself, when are you ever not you? You do not stop being you when you're thinking about work or cooking or exercise. So this is the highest, the person who under no circumstances, spontaneously and without effort, never deviates from the knowledge of the self. Ramana Maharshi uses the example, just like for the ordinary person, we don't wake up in the morning doubting that we have a human body, thinking we're a goat or a cow or a horse or a pig. So that's the state of the highest order of jnana. Whether they're in spiritual practices, whether they're in satsang, whether they're just doing ordinary stuff, they never forget or lose the most obvious thing in the world: omnipresence of me, yourself. Describe the middle level for me again, Punit. I forgot how she framed it.
At other times, when not engaged in actions. I think, let me read the previous verse where she was. Says, by one who is concentrated, or at other times by one who is not concentrated, is the middling.
Yeah, so the middling one is, I need to keep recollecting. Oh, yes. I have to kind of remind myself of it. I have to work at it a little bit. When I get distracted, I lose my apprehension of the self a little bit, maybe. I bring my mind back. Oh, Chidananda Rupa. And the lowest is that person who only with great effort and attention has to continually be introverting the mind, reminding themselves, I am back. Going on.
Swapnadishva vyavasthasu yada syat paramastitihi vichara kshanatulyeva siddhi sa paramottama. When the supreme state of absorption in undivided consciousness can exist even in states like the dream, as if it were similar to the moment of investigation, As the pure I consciousness destitute of identification with the body and the like, that accomplishment would be the most excellent.
So I guess what they're saying is some yogis even have lucid dreams. They dream, and the content of their dream is they're in the state of knowledge. Doesn't happen to me. Going on.
Sarvatra vyavahareshu yatnat sanskara bodhatah yada pravritti siddhe sa parakashtha samirita. When there is engagement in actions everywhere through the awakening of the impressions due to former actions by effort, that is declared as the utmost limit of accomplishment. Note, in the stage of complete self-realization, even the impressions due to former actions need to be awakened with effort for engaging in actions. An ignorant person is impelled to act by the force of such former impressions helplessly.
So most of us have an underlying state of vasana pressure. And in fact, there's some deliberate action to have to meditate. What they're saying here is for those of the highest state, they're immersed in the self so deeply that they have to consciously and deliberately move out into the world. Next one.
Ayat nainaiva parame sthiti sanvedanatmani avyahata yada siddhi tada kashtam samagata. When the existence in the supreme state of the nature of consciousness, quiet without effort, is unobstructed, then the accomplishment has arrived at its limit.
Yes. So not only is my knowledge steady all the time, but the mind has retired into the self. And it's effortless. Mind no longer extroverts into the. That's the highest. Going on.
Vyavahara paro bhavan pashyannapi na pashyati dvaitam tadahi sa siddhi purnatam bhi sangata jagaradav vyavaharanapi nidrita vadatta yada sthitistadahi sa siddhi purnatam abhisangata. Wholly engaged in action, though seeing objects, he does not see duality. Then alone that accomplishment has attained completeness.
Yes.
Though acting in wakefulness and the like, when his existence is like one asleep, then alone that accomplishment has attained completeness.
Yes. So again, the scriptures say we must resolve 3 questions. Who am I? What is this world and how has it come about? Who am I? Aham Brahmasmi. I'm that space of pure awareness. What is this world of name and form? Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. It's all Brahman. What about the names and forms? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Brahman alone is real. The names and forms are imagination, illusion. Third question, how does it come about? Sankalpa. The whole world is imagined, not created. All the names and forms, nothing but wrong. This state is the highest. Going on.
Jnaninam vividhanam cha sthitim janiti sarvada. Wait, I think I missed. Sorry, I was reading the wrong one. Evam siddhim anupraptah siddheshuttam uchyate vyavahara paro nityam na samadhim vimuchyati kadachidapi medhavasi siddheshuto mato matah. Thus, the one who has arrived at accomplishment of self-knowledge is called the highest among the accomplished ones. Wholly engaged in action constantly, the wise one does not give up samadhi or absorption in the self at any time. He is considered as the best among accomplished ones.
So, some people, their samadhi is only when they retire to the meditation seat. But here the goddess is saying, the highest, whether you're involved in deep meditation, in the world, mind is absorbed, reveling in the self. Atmarama. Always tasting Brahmananda Rasa, the juice of the bliss of Brahman. Next one.
Jnaninam vividhanam cha sthitim janati sarvada svanubhutya svantareva sa siddheshu tamo matah. He always knows the state of various stages possessed of knowledge by his own experience within himself. He is considered as the best among accomplished ones.
So one person of wisdom can tell another. They can feel if another person's mind is empty yet absorbed in consciousness. Can't tell a person of wisdom by what they're doing, only by this. Next one.
Sanshayo vapi kamo va yasya nasta yeva leshatah nirbhayo vyavahareshu sa siddheshu tamo matah. He is considered as the best among accomplished ones for whom there is not even a little doubt or desire and who is fearless in his actions.
So no doubt, no desire, no jonesing. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. And fearless. That was amazing to watch in Swamiji. He was so fearless. And authentic and spontaneous at the same time. Nothing phony. Next one.
Sarvam sukham cha dukkham cha vyavaharam cha jagatam swatman yevabhijanati sa siddheshu tamo matah. He is considered as the best among accomplished ones, who recognizes only in his own self all happiness and sorrow and the affairs of the world.
So, all the vicissitudes of the mind are within me. All the affairs of the world are inside me, not as an ego, but as the self. Now, this section that she's describing is much like the marks of the man or woman of steady wisdom in Gita. Of what value is it to us who are yogis on the path? And for the person of wisdom, these are spontaneous. They happen without effort. But for you and me, we can take these qualities and endeavor to cultivate them. Always this implies practice. We can practice taking the risk to be fearless. We can practice keeping the mind absorbed in the self, all these various things that these verses have talked about. Next one.
Atyantam baddhamatmanam muktam chapi prapashyati ya swatmani tu sarvatma sa siddheshu tamo matah. He is considered as the best among accomplished ones who, the self of all, sees the completely bound soul as well as the liberated one in his own self.
Yes. So, the enlightened or awakened mind and the mind in bondage are still just forms in this play of the world. So the man of wisdom has no judgment. It is his joy to be a spiritual midwife and perhaps facilitate someone waking up. But he has no judgment of ignorance. Next one.
Ya pashyan bandhajalini sarvada swatmani sputam moksham nakshe napekshate kwapi sa siddheshu tamo matah. He is considered as the best among accomplished ones, who does not hope for liberation anywhere, seeing the net of fetters always in his own self clearly.
Seeing the what fetters?
The net of fetters.
Ah. So, Swamiji used to say the mind is a sewer. Notice he didn't say your mind is a sewer, my mind is a sewer. That's just the mind, the net of fetters. So he not only can see his own kleshas, afflictions, and move through them, free them, loosen those knots of the heart, but he can clearly see the fetters of another, and will intuitively know how to meet that person right where they are, untangle that particular knot. And again, going back to what I was saying earlier, when a yogi knows his own mind, he knows everybody's mind. And that's a useful posture out there in the world. Assume we are more alike than we are different. Many of us go out there with a case of terminal uniqueness. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. I have it worse than anybody. Oh, you don't understand my particular unique problems. I had a student, what is today, Thursday? I guess she was here on Monday. And as she was leaving, she was saying, my God, everything in class tonight just spoke to me right where I'm at. And what I said to her is, you're such a textbook case that they wrote a book about you 1,000 years ago. And you're on every page. We are not unique in that way. We all have the syndrome of ignorance, attachment, identification. The solutions are basically the same. Next one.
Siddho hame veha na bhedas tvavayo kvachit etadva rishaya proktam sushpashtamanuyuktaya etanmayoktam vijnaya na kvachit parimuhyati. The best of accomplished ones is myself alone in this world. There is no difference between us anywhere. Sages, this has been explained to you clearly by me who was questioned by you. Understanding this, which has been declared by me, one is not deluded anywhere.
Yes. So the best of sages knows that the self in me is the same as the ground of being. Tripura. Shiva. Brahman. God. Many, many names. Listen carefully. If a person thinks they're an enlightened person, Jivukta. They're stupid. But if they know Aham Brahmasmi, I am that heartless Brahman, it's Ajati, birthless, Amritam, deathless, Achalam, never moves, Kutusta, still, stay, Nirupaham, without any form. And they know that's the truth of everybody. That's wisdom. Going on.
Ityuktva sapara vidya viraram bhrigudvaha shutvaitat drishya sarvam san Shrutvaitat drishya sarvam san deham payaya pacha natva shivadin lokeshan jagmu swam swam niveshanam. Descendant of Bhrigu, having said thus, that supreme goddess who is knowledge became silent. The sages, having heard this, giving up all their doubts and bowing to Shiva and the other gods of the world, went to their respective abodes.
So we're continuing the narrative. Everybody becomes silent. They return from it, pranam, go back to their abodes. Going on with the story.
Vidya Gita Maesha Te Prokta Papau Dhanashini Shruta Vicharita Samyak Swatma Samrajya Dayani. This Vidya Gita, or Song of Knowledge, which destroys a multitude of sins, has been communicated to you by me. It is the giver of complete sovereignty over one's own self when properly heard and investigated.
So that's been the title of this section, the Vidya Gita, the summation of the teaching, the song of knowledge. Going on.
Vidya Gita Tyutam Evam Sakshad Vidya Nirupita Pathatam Pratyaham Prita Jnanam Dishati Sa Swayam Sansara Timira Modhau Majjatam Tarani Bhavet. This most excellent Vidya Gita, or Song of Knowledge, is determined by knowledge as Tripura directly. She herself grants knowledge to those reading it every day, being pleased with them. It would be a raft for those sinking into the ocean of darkness that is the course of worldly existence.
So in the language of poetry, what the scripture is saying is it's encouraging us to swadhyaya. Swadhyaya means self-study. So go back, reread this chapter. Think about all the elements of it. Apply it to your own life situation. This is Swadhyaya. And this is what the scripture is encouraging us to do with this Vidya Gita. Going on.
That's the end of the chapter, new chapter.
Okay. So that's your assignment. Which chapter was this? Which number?
This was 20.
Go home, check out chapter 20. Go through it again on your own. 21, going on.
Ekavinshayodhyaya, chapter 21. Shrutvetham bhargava ramo dattatreya muniritam avidya jala vibhrante muktaprayo bhabhuvaha. Bhargava Rama, thus having heard what was told by Dattatreya, became mostly liberated from the delusion caused by the snare of ignorance.
So, Parashurama, having heard the teaching from Dattatreya, is the term he said mostly liberated?
Yes, became mostly liberated.
That's a very interesting language. Let's see if they develop that idea. Going on.
Puna prapachan trisutam kinchichannatva subhaktitaha bhagavan bhruvi vijnana sadhanam suvinishritam sarabhutam cha subhalam yat sakshat phaladayakam jnaninam lakshanam chapi yenyasyami tandrutam. He again asked the son of Atri, bowing a little out of devotion, Venerable One, tell me the well-ascertained means of knowledge, which is essential, easy, and bestowing the fruit manifestly, and also the characteristics of sages possessed of knowledge, by which I shall know them immediately.
Yes, so here he asks for an even more concise review. And we have a setup of, again, one of these sections, the marks of the person of steady wisdom. Going on.
Jnaninam deha sanyoge viyoge cha sthitim tatha vyavaharam kurvatam cha apyanasaktam manakatam etat sarvam sukripaya sprishtam me vaktumarhasi. The state of sages possessed of knowledge, when there is association with the body or separation from it, that is, when they are body conscious or otherwise, and as to how the mind of those sages, even performing actions, is unattached, pray tell me all this clearly out of compassion.
So he's more specific with his questions. Let's see what happens next.
Evam trisuta prishtodjam dagni sutena vai santushta praha karuna sindhu sambodhya bhargavam shrinu rama pravakshyami rahasyam jnana sadhanam. Thus asked by Parashurama, Dattatreya, the ocean of compassion, being pleased, said to Bhargava, instructing him, Rama, listen, I shall tell you the secret means of knowledge.
All right. Should we stop there? No, let's see what it says. Going on.
Jnanasya sadhanam mukhyam devatanugraha paraha ya sarva bhavata swatma devatamo pasangataha tasya jnanam sulabham bhavatiti vinishchayaha etat sarvottamam rama proktam jnanasya sadhanam. The principal means of knowledge is the supreme grace of the deity. For him who has approached the deity, who is his own self with all sincerity, knowledge becomes easy of attainment. This is a certainty. Rama, this means of knowledge is declared as the greatest of all the means.
So here he's saying to echo the Hebrew saying, what is the greatest of the commandments? Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul, mind and strength. This opens the human heart and invokes the grace of the infinite. In Vivekachudamani, Shankara sets out the qualifications of a fit student: Viveka, Vairagya, Shamati, Guna, Mumukshutva. And then afterwards he says, others say that bhakti alone is supreme. But then he nuances all this. He says, constant attempt to live up to our true nature is considered devotion. So in the beginning, it's our devotion to God out there. But it's not that which you worship here. It's yourself. So our devotion to that. Who am I? What is my essential nature? Oh. Being devoted to that. That's the most direct means. Going on.
Anyapapekshamitattu phala sansadhane kshamam etadvihayan datra na samyak phaladam bhavet. This is capable of accomplishing the fruit independently of another. Leaving this, another cannot give the fruit here properly.
So, without this intense love of God as you currently understand God, God with a form, God without a form, God is yourself. Other practices, then it becomes like the people who, oh yeah, I'm taking a yoga class. I do that before my Pilates and after I go get my massage. Nothing's going to happen. Or our family does these chants because this is what we do because we're Brahmanas. And I'm thinking about dinner while I'm chanting. Going on.
Shrinvatra karanam rama sakaranam idam bhavet vijnanam kevala chitta arya sarvasya vav bhasika tasyava bhasarupaya kalpitavaranam tuyat vicharat tadapohena tatsva rupopalakshanam. Rama, hear the reason as to this. This should have a reason. Knowledge is pure consciousness, which is the illuminator of all. By the removal of the covering fashioned by the freedom of will of that pure consciousness, which is of the nature of light through investigation, There is the perception of its natural state by identity with it.
So here he's talking about the practice of Atma Vichara. Action does not solve the problem because action does not contradict or conflict or alleviate ignorance, which is the problem. What is the antidote to ignorance? Knowledge. How do I get knowledge? Investigate. So when a mind may very sattvic, by however means you choose, with the attentive faculty introverted, investigate. Who am I? Who sees the thoughts and the silence between them? And we are only able to do this by the Mother's grace. Going on, next verse.
Tachanyesham bahirbhava tatparanam sudarlabham bhakta namanya parata hanena tatparatvatah sulabham shighra sanprapyam bhavatyeva sunikshitam. But that is difficult of attainment for others who are exclusively devoted to external objects. For devotees, by the relinquishment of the perception of superiority in another, and on account of exclusive devotion to the deity, it is certainly easy and attainable quickly. Note, the deity is the self of the devotee. Due to the inwardness of the mind brought about by worshipping the deity, absorption in the self or pure consciousness becomes easy of attainment.
Yes. Thank God, God is the most beloved, or we'd all be screwed. Remember the ruthless rule of the mind. The mind will return to the experience that's given it the greatest juice. And right now, if your greatest juice is something in the world, it's hard. So love God, worship God with a form. As your mind becomes more subtle, the God you worship isn't the form, it's really yourself. Tune up the mind. Let go of the world and come home. And even if you have just one experience of the taste of the bliss of your own self-nature, that desire to have it again then becomes the engine for your sadhana. God will then start pulling you from the inside. Come to me. Come to me, all you who travail and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus said that. Christians think that dude born 2,000 years ago is going to give rest. But he was in a full state of yoga. It's yourself talking. Come home to me if you have troubles and are heavy laden. I in you. Give you rest. Next verse.
Devatat tat devatatat parastaivam bhutva swalpanya sadhanam gyatva kathanchitatma manyan prati nirupayan sada rama samavesham samapnuyat. Thus, being exclusively devoted to the deity, having a few other means like indifference to worldly enjoyments, meditation, and the like, and having known his self somehow, let him define it to others. Rama, always ascertaining in the above manner, he would obtain permeation by the self, that is, his mind assuming the nature of the self or pure consciousness.
So by the additional means of vairagya, shama, dhamma, uparati, all those sorts of things, we come to know the self. Then there's a very interesting suggestion here, and we find it also in Taittiriya Upanishad. At the end of Taittiriya Upanishad, there's a refrain that repeats, Swadhyaya pravachane-cha, Swadhyaya pravachane-cha, meaning your own self-study, keep reviewing the scripture, reviewing this knowledge, and pravachana, teach one another. By sharing this with a fit student, with a fit fellow traveler, it helps root the knowledge in your own. Any thoughts on this? This is why Swamiji was so big on establishing what he called study groups. People would get together once a week. He'd be gone. He'd come and do a camp for 2 weeks and you wouldn't see him for a year. But we would get together as study groups and stumble through the scriptures, endeavoring to express the understanding we have. Pravachana, manana. Any thoughts on this? And if you can't explain it simply to another person, you probably have some confusion. Now, I think someone being a teacher is karmic. I don't think we necessarily need to go out and become preachers on the corner. I don't think evangelization is really part of our tradition. But generosity is. Generosity is. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Jim,
go ahead.
I was saying that, what about just simply writing?
Writing is a way of sharing, of course.
Right.
Of course. But you'll find very interesting things. I'm thinking of a particular student who started to share their understandings and their insights on Facebook. Two things happened. They started to get into flaming spiritual wars with other people.
Oh, Lord.
So that means
That's no use.
that means you're starting to take your own opinion seriously.
Right.
Then they also said, had someone say, "Oh, will you be my guru?" And that can be very, very dangerous. So
Right.
what we
I
do-
meant primarily writing for oneself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a very dear friend, DC Rao, who's in Washington, DC. And that was a major way in which he cleared his own understanding, was through writing for himself.
Mm.
Depends on your own nature, what you're drawn to. All right, it's 9 o'clock. What verse are we on for next week?
You're going to do 15, 16 next week.
All right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all.